Looks good.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
You can just stop it right now.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Hello, welcome to Uncommunity, where we speak with community builders, creators around to talk about all things communities and how do you build thriving communities and what it will take for people to build communities. So today I have Arvid Kahl. He is the Bootstrap founder. I mean, he goes by the title or the designation, the Bootstrap founder. But I've been following him. It's great to today. It's great to have him on the show and to chat with him. Welcome, Arvid.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's start with what your background and what have you been doing and what and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. Well, I used to be a software engineer. That's how I would describe myself a couple of years ago, but that has changed quite a bit. Now I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a writer. And a software engineer at the same time. It's like kind of all together. It's crazy how one leads into the other, and they all kind of feed off each other. So I would consider myself these three things at this time. I've been building software products for the last couple decades, I guess, like since 2000, and so a couple years after that I started, and then I've been building projects for myself. I worked for a Silicon Valley funded VC funded company, and started a couple businesses with a couple friends myself that didn't go anywhere. Worked for a regular software enterprise here in Germany. That was nice. And then in 2017, I co-founded a software as a service business with my girlfriend in the education technology segment that was called Feedback Panda. We grew that from zero to $55,000 MRR within 2 years, and then we sold the business. And since then, I've been writing because all of a sudden I had a lot of time. If you don't run a business 24/7, all of a sudden you need to fill your time with something. So I wrote a book called Zero to Sold, which kind of details the whole story of the business, like what I learned running Feedback Panda, building it and selling it. Every single part of the journey is in the book. I didn't intend to write a book. It's been a thing that my growing audience demanded of me in a way, because I've been blogging a lot. It's like the Bootstrap Founder, as you mentioned, is the blog that I started almost immediately after we sold the business, just because I needed something to do. I had all these learnings from those 2 years and all the years before, and I just wanted to finally give back to this community of indie hackers, other founders, and just SaaS entrepreneurs that had always been giving information to other people, right? In podcasts like this, just sharing what they knew. And since I had benefited so much from that, I just wanted to start giving this information back to people that I had learned. So I started a blog and I wrote every week. I wrote a newsletter. I started a podcast myself to hold myself accountable because I'm super lazy. So if I don't have a reason to do a thing, I don't do it. So I needed something that would have like this regular weekly schedule. And I wrote and wrote, and after a while it kind of looked like all these things fit together. So I turned it into a guide. And then somebody told me, well, I would pay for this if you could print it out. And I thought, okay, could probably turn this into a book. Then I wrote the other half of the things that I wanted to write, and I released the book in like June 2020, which was weird. It's a weird year to release a book or to do anything, but it was fairly successful because I built this following of people on Twitter in particular that had followed me from selling the business through my first little steps on the blog to actually writing meaningful stuff that they value to then turn it into a product. So in the book, I talk a lot about audience first, and like focusing on your audience, your community, and taking the product as a result of this and not as your original kind of starting point. The product is a result, not a starting point. That's one of the main points I make in the book, and that has gotten a lot of positive responses, a lot of good feedback. And now I'm working on my next project, which is another book that focuses on this point, the audience. And that's where I'm at. That's where I'm from, and that's what I'm currently doing.
Yeah, very interesting journey. I mean, it, from the looks of it, for someone new, it may look like you have just like like you just made $55,000, and then you have been selling books, you have been writing blogs, but then there is a whole journey that you have been doing slowly, and it
Mhm.
all, I guess it's a compounding effect,
Yeah,
and then you suddenly see a result, right?
absolutely.
uh, you make an interesting point, right? You said you're building following on Twitter, you have been sharing information online, right? So that,
Mhm.
like, you're literally open sourcing all the stuff that you did to
Yeah,
build a
pretty much.
product, build a successful product, right?
Yeah.
And then you're taking those learnings, and now now let's go forward and talk about your latest book, right? So you have
Mhm.
been working on a book called Audience First, right?
Yes.
So tell us about, like, what like what made you do, like, write another book, right? Just after Zero to Sold, you have been writing Audience First, right? And then the second question is, like you've been talking and getting feedback from people directly,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? Like, what would you like to know about, like, on in this book? So share us the journey, like, what
Sure.
have you been doing and what is the story?
So one of the main responses that I got to Zero to Sold was that people, the later in the journey of an entrepreneur, the more they understand what's going on. It's pretty much like, if people are 2 years into building a business, they have a pretty firm grasp on who they're serving, what the product is, and they understand their market. They understand what options they have when it comes to selling their business or keeping it running or hiring, all these things. Like, it's pretty obvious. You learn on the journey. So
Yeah,
you kind of ingrain these things over the years. And the stage in the beginning, like the moment where people choose to become an entrepreneur, they haven't done anything yet, right? They haven't founded a business, they haven't written any line of code, or haven't used any no code tool to build anything yet. They just really want to start a business. That's the most scary moment. And that's the moment where most people make a choice on what to start with. And many people, at least the one that come from conventional schooling, conventional engineering school, or business school, they are kind of, they think that the big business idea, that's where to start with, right? You want to build, I don't know, Tinder for cats, or you want to build the next Uber, or these big things,
yeah,
these big product based ideas, because people see all these VC founded businesses making a lot of money. These people, the CEOs, getting rich of it, or somewhat some sort of notoriety. They want to have that success, but they start with the product. They start with, I need to make this, just from their own imagination. And that usually leads to pretty risky situations, right? If you start with an idea and you haven't validated anything about it, you don't know if there's anybody who would buy it. You don't know if it's actually solving a problem. And if it is a problem, is it a meaningful problem to people? Are there people out there that would actually pay money to have it solved? And all these questions are there. And people just ignore them because they think, well, they did Uber, maybe my idea is just as big, who knows, right? They completely lack this fundamental approach to creating the idea in a validated way. And
yeah,
I saw this because in my book, I try to do this already in Zero to Soul. Like, the first half of the book is one of 4 stages that I think an entrepreneurial journey has, right? The preparation stage. Anything before you actually start your whole business is the first stage, and that fills half of the book. The other 3 fill the second half of the book. So they're much smaller in scope because you have to get it right from the beginning. And I
yeah,
started with saying you need to find an audience, and then you need to find their critical problem. Then you need to find a solution that actually solves this problem in a way that fits into the workflow. And only when you've figured out a solution, then you build it. Then you build a product. Most people start with the product, they hope it's a solution, they hope there's a problem that it solves, and they hope that somebody pays for it. So I'm trying to flip this around. And that is
yeah,
quite literally the audience first approach. And the more people read my book, and the more I actually started mentoring people and helping them through their own journey, I figured that people really struggled with this initial part. How do I find
yeah,
my audience? Not just how do I build an audience? That's also part of it, right? That's the kind of building a following. But to me, an
yeah,
audience is more than just a group of people that listen to me. I'm trying to find a definition, and I don't think I'm quite there yet. But to me, an audience is everybody who should be interested in what you do, your business, what your business does, or what your product does. One of these 3 things. And that can involve people who are currently customers, who might be your customers in the future, who were your customers in the past, who might be interested in building businesses like yours. That all could be your audience, right? Audience is a fairly large term, and there's a lot of overlap with community. There's a lot of overlap with market. I'm trying to keep those distinct. It's kind of hard because everybody has their own definition, and that's also at the heart of audience first, is to understand first what audience means, right? And then act on this. Because if you think your market is your audience, well, then you're dismissing that there might be forces beyond your market that could also be your potential audience. If you think a community is your audience, well, then you're ignoring all the other communities around it that might also be potential customers. It's a very complicated thing, and I'm trying to rein it into a format that people understand. And since I'm trying to write a book about an audience-first approach, this was a shower thought, right? One of these things that just comes to you in the shower. I thought, well, maybe I should actually ask my potential readers what they want to know about, and not just write the book, but actually do audience first in an audience first way. Like approach the writing of the book as if I were building a product for an audience that I want to serve. And that's what all successful businesses start with, is understanding the audience that you want to serve eventually. You don't have to have them around you yet. You don't necessarily need to know exactly who it is, the exact people, but to know, I want to write a book for founders who struggle with building their business, right? Who struggle with getting to the point where they can get going. That's my audience. So I asked on Twitter, right? That's the first thing I always do when I have a question. I have a couple thousand followers there, and I asked them, well, are you interested in this? And people said, sure. So I made a landing page, and I added like the kind of, you can send in information about what you want to read in the book, and I will put it on the page, which is like, it's collaborative from the beginning. And you can sign up to be an alpha reader. So once the first draft is done, then I'm going to send it out so people can critique it and tell me, is this too slow? Is this incomprehensible? Is this too much, too little? You know, like people love critiquing. So having a group, at this point, it's a couple hundred people who want to be an alpha reader for the book. So they get all the insight, but also they get my sloppy writing. So I guess they have to deal with that. But the idea
it's like
is
proofreading.
Exactly. It's proofreading, but by the people who actually care. With Zero to Sold, I had proofreading too, and I had an editor, but those were not the people that I was going to serve, right? These were professional editors, and I'm going to have professional editors and professional proofreaders, but the whole point is that before it goes to these people who make it really shiny, the book actually gets created within the community that it's supposed to serve in the end. And that's the idea behind the audience-first approach to writing the audience-first book about audiences.
Yeah, it's a lot of audience in just one sentence.
That's right.
So I get totally get your point, because I've been building communities for like past 4-5 years. But then whenever I hear someone building communities, like, so we hear a lot of things like not build in community, like, but build with communities, like get input from your community members, right? Get input from your users, so that they can guide you on what to do next, right? Yes. And that's a good point for anyone like listening to this, right? Like you need to find your audience, right? You need to find your audience, you need to know who they are. And I think it's very different than like the startups that fancy these words like total addressable market, right? Like it's very like Silicon Valley. I mean, anyone who's building it's total addressable market.
Honestly,
I don't think it makes
that
sense.
That term to me just it yells that is just about masses of people, right? They don't care about the intent and the actual interests behind every single person. They care about a unified group, and that needs to be a general group. Like you're not going to talk about total addressable market and niche communities in the same sentence.
Exactly.
You couldn't, because they're opposites in terms of scope. But particularly, and I call the blog the Bootstrap Founder because I care about bootstrapping as a financial means to building a business, right? As the opposite of a highly VC-backed business where they just throw money at you and expect you to explode and capture all that market. In a bootstrap business, you could really slowly grow as long as it's sustainable. Doesn't matter how many customers you add in a month. Your growth rate is completely up to you, how much you want it to grow, right? In an ideal situation, obviously you're going to struggle to grow a business because it's always hard to do anything entrepreneurial. But the idea is that you don't have somebody breathing down your neck telling you that you need to double your customer size before next month, or you're going to have a problem, right? There's something about control in owning the business that makes a big difference when it comes to at some point selling it or removing yourself from it and just getting like consistently building wealth, which we did through selling Feedback Panda. That was the thing, right? We sold this business and now we don't have to work. That's pretty much the idea that many bootstrappers have: slowly, reliably, sustainably build value. And if you want to do that, and that's the whole point why I'm saying this, starting with a small, well-defined community or niche or market segment or whatever you want to call it, right? All these words kind of try to describe the same thing. It's a pretty smart move, because either way, if the niche itself is growing, your market expands. Or if the niche is not growing, there's adjacent niches where you could more easily go into. They're not going to be the same. You're going to have different requirements, but at least you'll have a path, right? If you start with all the people, like building a tool for everybody who works in marketing, there's millions of people. You're not going to solve millions of people's problem, like all their problems at the same time. But if you want to go into like SEO, like specific SEO optimization, or even like more smaller niche segments within that, right? SEO optimization for recruitment platforms. There is something there, and there's a lot of platforms out there, and they all need help. Like there's always a niche somewhere that you can start, and that is big enough for you to build what is often called a lifestyle business. I don't like the term. To me, it's derogatory, right? Because it's kind of, it's not a real business, it's a lifestyle business. Hey, if my lifestyle is I wake up whenever, do some work for however long I want, and then I go to bed after having a great meal, if that's the lifestyle, don't mock it. It's pretty cool, right? If that's the lifestyle you can accomplish, then a lifestyle business is all you need. So that to me is the difference in approach. Because if you own the business, the whole business forever, then you're not beholden to these other powers that need you to be general. You can be specific. You can be the scalpel, right? You don't need to be the Swiss Army knife that solves every single problem. You can be the highly specific scalpel that's used by somebody who operates on people, like a surgeon. Like you want that, because people pay a lot of good money for these scalpels. Swiss Army knives, they may be expensive, maybe due to brand recognition, but they don't do the job well, right? So being a specific is always something to start at least, start with, and that can be done in a niche community. So yeah, terms like totally addressable market make no sense for bootstrappers, at least not in the beginning. You might grow into this kind of sphere, but why would you? I don't think you need to necessarily.
Yeah, such a great point. I mean, like it makes sense, right? Like divide the broader segment into smaller parts so that you can have something. And I guess it makes sense, like for a bootstrapper, like for someone who wants to just grow 1% every day. So there's this famous saying, I mean, don't try to overgrow. And when you have like VC money or something like that, like there is a pressure. But when you are just bootstrapping a business, just grow 1% every day, and then you find what you are trying to do, like what you're trying to accomplish, and then you get it.
It's also most people who bootstrap and build their businesses themselves, they don't have a big team, right? They need to be a generalist in their business. So if you're already a generalist in your own business, you need the business to be specific, because then otherwise you don't have any specificity. You're building a generic business for everybody, and you need to do every single job. Not gonna happen, right? So I think you're right. There's definitely something to that. Yeah, I always feel building a business in a smaller team gives you the opportunity to say no to more things. When you look at VCs, they kind of expect you to follow the rules, right? There's this kind of system where you have the CEO, you have the COO, and then you have a CIO, and you have a CTO, and then under them is like the VP of engineering, and then there's the VP of finance. And you have the structure that you eventually need to grow into, because that is how businesses work. There's the board, and then you have these people. It turns into this kind of role-playing game, and you need to play your part, which is fine if you like it, right? I mean, I'm not bashing VC. I've been part of this world for a couple of years. It was super interesting. I met very interesting people, and a lot of money was wasted on things that it shouldn't have been spent on. But it was definitely an eye-opener for me to see, okay, this world is more about the formality of business than actually working on the things that matter, right?
Yeah.
It's still there. But for a bootstrapper, everything you do needs to add value to your business. There's no way around that, because if you waste your time, you spend more money than you make, well, then your money's going to be gone. And there's nobody who can give you a couple million because it's just you and your bank account, right? Yeah. So the decisions you make in a bootstrap business are so much more focused on both the short-term accomplishment of short-term goals, but also long-term at the same time, which I see not necessarily always with the VC-backed businesses that go from round to round. Right? You raise, you try to spend it, try to grow at all costs, and just hope that there's another round in the future. Yeah, not my kind of project.
I mean, yeah, there's nothing against VC even for me. I'm like, you're just putting it out there. I mean, it's an interesting business for definitely whatever they're doing, whatever they're trying to do. But this is mostly for, I mean, whatever speaking, it's like it's for bootstrappers, right? So just
and if you have a product that needs VC funding, right, then you have to get VC funding. If you want to build like the next like fintech business, the next bank, well, you're not going to do this with like $20,000 initial money. It's not going to happen. So there are definitely projects that can only happen with external funding, and it's perfectly fine to take it. But if you want to build your own little sustainably grown, eventually big business, start with a niche, don't need funding at all, embed yourself in your community, understand what their problems are and solve them for those people. Like, find your product idea from the problems that people are presenting to you today. That's like, you don't need to know what Uber clone you're going to build. You just need to listen to your audience. And that's kind of what I got like in writing. I just wrote, listened to the feedback, and then that guided me to what I was going to write in the future. And that guided me to the book, and that guides me to the next one. It's just listening to people will be pretty clear what they need.
Yeah. So I'm sure you know this person called Pieter Levels, the nomad list, right? So he's just a like solid example of like 1% or 2% team doing like so much good work, like millions of revenue by what he's doing. It's a great example. And whenever someone asks, I'm like, hey, just follow this guy.
Peter, just want to say one thing. He also inspired me in many ways to write my book about the journey, because his make book is also pretty fantastic, right? And I like this. I like that there's people in the community that build in public, that teach in public, and that have no problem giving away their secrets. I try to do the same thing because they aren't secrets, right? The thing is, like, I'm telling people to start with an audience, find their problems, solve it, and then build something. It's not a secret. Like, that's what everybody who successfully builds a business is doing. It's just some people have to hear it from you. And some people haven't heard it yet, right? Just because somebody else has also written about this, like every business book essentially is about this, or in some way or another. But I took my spin, sharing my story, hoping that I can inspire a couple of people. And apparently I have been. And Peter has been doing a phenomenal job at communicating his success, his failures, his project success, his project failures. There's so many cool tweets that he's been tweeting over the last years, where he's been building stuff that didn't work out. And that's awesome. This is important. It's important for people to see that even Pieter Levels, right, who's really well known in the community and who's super successful with lots of projects, has these duds, things that don't work. Things that should have worked, but didn't. And he's fine. He just drops them and does something else, right? It's important for people to see that this is a way to do it, that they don't have to cling to their projects forever, but they can just say, okay, invalidate it, next project, right? And that's why I'm so focused about talking about validating stuff all the time. The easier, or let's just say, the quicker you invalidate an idea, the better. Because then you can actually go to the next idea which probably is better, still might not be, but at least you've proven that the last one you had didn't work, right? And if you only have one idea and you don't validate it and you build and build and build for years, well, you waste all this time. You waste all this
Right.
time that you could have spent on more ideas, better ideas, more engaging ideas that people actually have problems with, right? So invalidating or validating, whatever you want to call it, I try to take the negative approach because you only need to find one good counterexample to the thing that you want to build to not build it, right? It's easy to find people saying, oh, yes, I would totally use that. Like a lot of people say that. And if you read The
Yeah.
Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick, the book, which I highly recommend, you kind of learn how to not talk to people so they don't give you that answer. But if you ask for validation, you will find it somewhere. So I look for invalidation. I look for people who don't meet this product. And the more of those I find, the more I think, okay, maybe it's not a good idea. So that's also why talking to people is so important, and why being part of a community, being part of your future audience is elemental to any kind of success. Because if you don't know what they think, if you don't know how they act, well, how are you going to serve them?
Yeah, yeah. That's so right. And I mean, to add to your point, like when you validate your ideas, I mean, it's okay if like there should not be an emotional connection to whatever you're building, right?
Yeah.
Because that might just go, you might just go down the rabbit hole, and you might not find anything in that product. Just
Yeah.
pick something else and start building or start shipping.
Yeah, I actually wrote about this last week, I think, because I'm right now, in addition to writing, I'm also working on a new software as a service project, because as a software engineer, I can't stop building. So I have to.
Yeah,
So I thought, well, I'm going to solve one of my own problems, and problems that I saw in the author space. So it's a link forwarding system for people who want to put stable links in their books, but not going to talk about that. The idea, what I wrote about was exactly what you were saying, because I was building a prototype of this thing just to see if it works and if anybody thinks this is something useful. And the more I build it, the more I kind of felt, oh yeah, I need to make it perfect. Right? It's like kind of this perfectionism that we have as people who build products, because everything we see in the world around us is a mostly perfect product, right? Not that
yeah,
everything is great, but that people try the best with everything they produce. I'm talking into a microphone right now that is the best it could be, right? All the
yeah,
research teams behind this, people making this microphone, they did the best job they could be. They produced the best mic. So this is what I see: a flawless thing, a thing that has everything I need. So when then I build something, I also feel, oh, this should have everything, right? It has a login, it has analytics, and it has a payment system, and it has this and that, and notifications. And it's like, come on, I just wanted to build like a quick prototype to see if it can actually be physically done. And
Mhm.
what I see and what I wrote about was that I think on a conscious level, on a cognitive level, we totally know that we should only build the minimum viable product, the absolute minimum to test. But on a subconscious level, on this kind of social animal level that we are, people who want approval, people who want other people to think we're great, right? We don't see it that way. We see our MVP and we think, oh, this is not perfect. I can't show it to anybody just yet. Oh, I have to make it better. Even though we know it's an MVP, this thing could be gone tomorrow. We still feel it's not good yet. It's
Mhm.
this inner like the discourse that we're having with ourselves, where I hope at least we get to convince ourselves that the cognitive approach, the one build this, check it, build the next thing, is the one that wins, because everybody struggles with that. And the more technical you are, the more you struggle, because every technical person has been trained to see flawless execution as the pinnacle of their job, of their profession.
Mhm.
So it's an identity thing. If I don't build something perfect, then I'm a bad software engineer, even though the idea was to build something imperfect. You know, it's so complicated, and it's a big topic.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I think I mean your background, and if you look at it, so like the story about like how you got into Twitter and started sharing, because like you are a software like programmer, or like you are a programmer, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's very rare to, I mean, or I could be wrong, because it's very rare to find someone from a software background uh, uh, on Twitter talking about it, right? Until you become an indie hacker
Mm-hmm.
or a bootstrap business. Like, so how did you find your way into Twitter?
Well, Twitter always has been really helpful, and from a software engineer's perspective, because all the communities around the big programming languages kind of communicate on Twitter. Now, I guess over the last couple of years, Slack has taken more of that market share because of the ease of building a community Slack and having the topics being discussed in different channels and stuff. But before that, at least, before Slack came into the professional world, Twitter was where everybody was talking about all these programming languages. It was a great source of just being able to talk to the people that actually made things, right? People often share tutorials on Twitter, getting people onto their blogs, or they just talked about like new things, new features. It always was in the back of my mind. But I was never really active as a Twitter author, call it that, just tweeting a couple times a day, until I started blogging. So that was something where I figured out, okay, now I'm not just doing this for myself anymore, right? I'm not just using Twitter as a fire hose of information that I sift through and figure out the nuggets. Now I'm actually trying to share something meaningful with other people on Twitter. And that having something to share, the blog posts, my knowledge that I gained over the years, that changed my approach to Twitter as not just a consumption tool, but a tool for creation. Not only does it create cool tweets that people like, that is like the functional part, but it actually creates a discourse. It creates communication between people, and that it eventually manifests itself into community. I don't think I could claim that I have a community around myself. It's more like a following. Again, I'm trying to be precise, but there is a community in which I'm often engaged. Right? There's lots of people that you already had on the show that are in the same community. Everybody's talking about building. Everybody's talking about building community, building products, building businesses. And people in that space that want to do that, either they listen until they start, or they're already in the middle of it and they communicate while they build their business. And it's an extremely enjoyable thing to see people struggling. As much as this might be surprising, but seeing people struggle on Twitter usually means that either they overcome their struggle pretty much immediately and then talk about how they fixed it, or somebody helps them overcome their struggle and then teaching happened and learning happened. And you can learn from other people learning. And that is just so amazing about Twitter as like this public community, right? Because nothing happens. I mean, a lot happens in DMs, a lot of business happens in Twitter DMs, but the actual act of learning happens in Twitter public messages. And if you follow the right people, you get to just enjoy that. And that's what I like about the community. And that's also why I'm so active in there, because it's just every day I see somebody getting a new monthly recurring revenue goal, or they build a new feature, they land a new customer. Just today, somebody landed their mom as a customer in their business. Like, I just saw that on Twitter, without her knowing necessarily that was the business of the guy, right? It's just, you see these stories of little small successes, but 1% every day. And if you do that in public, you'll be at your yearly tripling everything, right? That's just gonna happen. Which is why Twitter is an amazing tool to build a community in our industry, right? Just saying that as there's limitation. There's a certain kind of limitation to Twitter. If you're building something for business or software, or for, I don't know, like money Twitter, people's self-actualization, finance and stuff, Twitter's great. But if you're building something for plumbers, if you're building something for construction workers or for online teachers, the tool that we built, Twitter might not be so great. So you have to find your community in where they are, where they hang out, where their water cooler is, before you can meaningfully engage with them. And Twitter might not always be that tool. Reddit might be, or private communities, or like not necessarily private, but just forums, web forums somewhere on the internet. There's a plumbing forum. There's a plumbing forum for Australian plumbers for some reason. I found all of this during my research for the book. This is really cool. There's all these communities. You just need to find them, become part of them, and listen to people.
Yeah. So right. So I mean, go where your people are is like the famous wording for people, where like if you want to build something, first go and look for your people, look for your tribe, look for your community, and engage with them, right? And try to engage or post, try to engage one-on-one, try to understand about what you want to do and what they are looking for. right? And then finally build a community, or finally build something that they want, right?
Yes.
That's the thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, so I had like this question, right? So we are talking about building in public, building an audience. So
Yes.
what's the downside of, like, let's, if someone is not building in public, what's the downside? And if someone is building in public, like, and if they fail, so what happens here, right? On a reality level, like,
Right.
there's a check where it happens, like, I just failed, and like, where's the motivation coming from?
Right. So I think there's two different incentives here. One is that your business becomes successful. That's always an incentive for an entrepreneur. But the other thing that I always feel personally is more important to myself is that I'm learning and that I'm becoming more of an expert in the field that I'm in. Right. And that could be anything. It could be an online English teaching, the software or the audience for the software as a service business that we built before, or now it could be authors for my other project, or it could be founders for my books, right? Just want to be more engaged in these communities to become not just more of a learner, but also more of a teacher. So I can share more of what I know with people. And building in public to me is teaching by doing. It's not teaching by standing in front of a class and lecturing. It's actually teaching through action. Like you say, this week I'm going to talk to 20 people about this this feature that I want to build. And then a week later, you say, well, I talked to 20 people. 15 said, well, I don't really think I would pay for this. That sucks. But at least you taught everybody who listened that audience exploration and validation of your feature idea can lead to invalidation, and it can actually prevent you from building something that you shouldn't have built, right? So even though you might fail and the whole business might fail, you as an expert, you always climb up as the person, your personal brand, as a founder, as somebody who's a domain expert, or as somebody who's a tribe, a leader in a tribe, leader in the community, that always climbs up, even if you fail, because you learn in public. And I think if you don't, then you not only do you miss out on other people helping you with your problems, you also miss out on elevating yourself in your community. I know that not everybody wants to be an expert in their community, and that is also fine. But there's certain kind of benefits that come with being a noticed expert in any community. You get invited onto podcasts. You get asked questions that might allow you to think about things differently. People ask you for help. People ask you to join their projects. People ask you to be on their boards. People ask you to all the different kind of things just because they know you did not fear public humiliation by failing. You were there, you went through it, and you came out stronger on the other side. And that is why I feel motivated to do everything I do in public. Because first off, sometimes people just reach out to me in an email telling me their opinion on stuff. And many, many times, this is something that I hadn't considered before, the thing they write about. So all of a sudden, people give me some really meaningful consulting, essentially for free, just because I talked about it in public. And you could pay a good money for this if you were to go to a consultant, but by being a part of a discourse, this comes just from people's engagement because they like you. They like what you're building, or they like the industry you work in, and they want to share their 2 cents. They want to give you their opinion. There's so many more benefits than potential risks. There's always risks, right? Building in public risks you being copied, your product being cloned, people building it better than you. But hey, if somebody can build a better product in an industry that you chose, maybe you chose the wrong industry, right? Maybe you're not really dedicated enough to that industry. Maybe you just thought you could make some good money, but you don't really care about it as much. So somebody else spent a bit more time and made a much better product. There's always risks in being public, and there's the risk of humiliation. And if you come from a culture where you don't talk about failure and you don't celebrate it, you don't necessarily have to celebrate it. You just have to understand it as a mode of bettering yourself. But if your culture forbids this, if you only boast, right? If that's the only thing you do, it's hard to do it. But it's a global community. People will understand that failure is an option. And again, maybe if you talk to people and they don't like you, then they're not your audience. So who cares, right? But you just pick somebody else. So I think building in public is absolutely valuable, more valuable than it has drawbacks or risks.
Exactly. I mean, that makes sense, right? I think it also keeps you accountable of what you're doing. Like
Yeah.
someone,
Yes.
there's a high chance, it's highly likely someone will. I mean, let's talk about you.
Mhm.
If you are like you're doing a podcast, you are doing a newsletter. I mean, you're doing multiple things, right? And
Mhm.
one fine day, you are not sending a push, a newsletter. Someone might
Yep.
definitely reach out. Hey, what happened? Right? Are you
Yeah.
fine? Like, and
I,
that's
I
something
already get
amazing.
those. I
Yeah.
recently stopped adding links to my newsletter because I just couldn't find the time anymore. I used to have a lot of links, interesting links to interesting projects. Took those out. Now I'm just like writing in the newsletter, like some narrative, right? That I have some kind of
Yeah.
article, pretty much. And people said, "Wow, I really miss those links." Like the week after I stopped, it's like got like 5 emails out of a couple thousand people. So it's not a lot, but still, it's like, oh man, I really like those links. They were always really cool. And it kind of stung a bit, right? Because man, I should have held myself to that standard. But in the end, people it didn't unsubscribe. Like I think that the newsletter has around 3,000 readers at this moment. And I think every day I get more people joining than unsubscribe. Like, it just doesn't happen. It just grows and grows and grows. But I'm not forcing it either, right? I'm just have a link on every part of my website to the newsletter. If people like my content, they subscribe. That's all. Right? I don't ask for more, and that seems to work. Because that one, the newsletter in particular, keeps me super accountable. I know I need to have something by Friday. Friday at 3, there needs to be something, something. And even if it's just a short something, I have to come up with something. And obviously I have a lot of thoughts, as you can probably tell, but taking the time to even take a thought and put that into something meaningful, you have to schedule this. And then you have to record a podcast episode. And you have to do, oh God, that's so much to do.
Yeah,
But I enjoy
yeah,
it.
yeah.
And for this community that I serve, I feel I owe them, because there's been so many people that were in the position that I am in right now back 5 years ago when I was just an engineer, and I learned from them. Every single one of them taught me so much by being open and sharing what they knew. Right, Rob Walling, of one that like the person behind Tiny Seed and Microconf and all these little things in our community. He wrote an amazing book that I read, Start Small, Stay Small, which triggered me to understand, oh yeah, this is something that I want. And then from there, I learned more about all the other people in the Microconf universe, which is essentially every Bootstrap founder in the community. And they taught me everything. And then I built my thing. And now I'm part of this. I mean, at Microconf Europe last year, Danielle and I, my partner and I, we had a little attendee talk about Feedback Panda and how we sold it. And now I'm part of this community. And that is awesome, right? It's like, now I'm there. Now I can make this happen for other people. And that's exactly why I wrote my book, because I kind of wanted to write the book that I would love to have read 5 years ago. That was the whole point.
Yeah, I think it's very solid, because so I was talking to another community builder, and she said the same thing, right? Like, start uplifting other people when you are in that position where you can uplift people, right? When you have given a chance, start appreciating like someone who is just starting. And I'm really like respect that you are already doing
Yes.
it, and it's so amazing to know that you're doing it. That's just amazing. Yeah.
It takes very little. Like particularly for me, I'm on Twitter every day. I see all these messages of people like reaching their first little goal, and I have like almost 9,000 followers now. So by just retweeting, I give this person the opportunity to find everybody else, right? To
Yeah.
find more customers, to find other founders that can help them, to just be followed by other people, and it doesn't cost me anything. It's a little click. Well, it's 2 clicks, but really that's all there is. And it
Yeah.
allows me to help them without really spending too much energy. And I really like this idea. Like, empowering people is the most enjoyable thing that I could do. It's even more enjoyable than coding. It's even more enjoyable than writing, is knowing that somebody else just has life a little bit easier.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. So you mentioned a book, Start Small, Stay Small, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's not go into the book, but then I saw somewhere in your book, like audience first, you
Mm-hmm.
have this points what you're trying to mention, right?
Yes.
And you have you say building micro communities instead
Yeah.
of a community. So tell me about this. Like, what's your take on building a micro community and why it is important?
To me, it's important to find the right people, right? You can, if you are indiscriminate of who follows you and who listens to you, then you don't really know who your following is, right? If you want to, let's just completely ignore the fact that you want to sell them something in the end. It's just like, if you try to validate your product or your business or your idea with a community, well, don't you want your community to be the actual target of that, right? And if you start a bootstrap business and you build a niche product, build a special thing instead of a generic thing, right? A specific thing instead of like an all-encompassing thing, well, then your audience is also very likely to be a very niche community, probably a tribal one too, where everybody knows each other, right? And or where everybody should know each other because they're all connected, they all share the same ideas, they follow the same people, they have the same interests. So yeah, that kind of sounds like a tribe to me. And I think if you build a product for a tribe, then the audience you create around you and around your product and the audience that you serve should be that tribe or something similar, right? It shouldn't be too generic. And I think numbers they matter only to a certain degree. It's nice to have a couple tens of thousands of followers. That's probably great. But if you only need a couple hundred customers because you're selling your, I don't know, software as a service business for $100 a month, right? You need 100 people, then you have 10K in MRR. Yeah. If that's all you need to pay yourself, pay your business, and live your lifestyle, business life, then you don't need 10,000 followers. You just need a couple hundred of the right ones. So building a specific community. Micro, the term micro really, really upsets me because I recently, there was a poll on Twitter or something where somebody asked like, how much MRR is a micro SaaS? And I was thinking, that's not what micro means. Like micro is not about size, although it is like a unit of size. But I think it's the level of zooming that you do into the community, into the market, into the audience. Like it's a microscope. It's not a micrometer, right? It's like more about the kind of precision that you talk about. So I feel a micro SaaS can be a gigantic business. Like if I look at Park.io, which is domain auctioning site for IO domains, really something super specific. It's run by one person, and it makes millions a year. It's like pretty much what Pieter Levels is doing, but on a different scale, like super specific. I think Peter's product is less specific, which is why I'm talking about Park. So that is a micro SaaS to me. And that is a micro community that he serves. People who care about .io domains. Like that is very small and very specific niche, but apparently it makes him millions. So can't say it's not a smart business to build and not a smart community and audience to engage. So I think when we talk about micro, it's the level of detail that we look into, not necessarily the size.
Okay, that's amazing. And because I was thinking micro could be a number, like, and like you said, right, micro doesn't mean like numbers. I mean, I still don't like trying to kind of understand because like, I mean, a lot of times when someone says a micro, like you said, micro SaaS, it's always, they always try to talk about numbers. And when it comes to communities, I mean, I don't think there's a difference between a community or a micro community. Like,
I don't think so either. And maybe it's the strength of the bonds within the community. Maybe a micro community is more tribal than a regular community because people know each other, because it's smaller, but not smaller in the sense that it's fewer people. It's more that it's cozier, right? They're all more together in a way. That's what I would think, because I see so many specific communities where you know that everybody knows each other. And if you mention somebody, like if you mention KP to me, I know who that is, because that is within what I would assume is it's a micro community of indie bootstrappers. That is still a pretty large group of people, but they're all laser focused on one thing. It's not like fans of beer, right? I mean, they're all focused on one thing pretty much, but there's so much beer out there. It's craft beer, there's like light beer, there's beer. I come from Germany. Like we have 40,000 different beers in this country. And if being a fan of the beverage, the beer, is super unspecific. But saying you're a fan of, I don't know, like Berliner Weisse, that is a beer from Berlin that has a super interesting history, and it's super bitter, and people have started adding pop or like a soda to it for some reason, because it used to be a post-war beverage that was so bitter that people couldn't drink it without adding something sweet. Like, there's specificity in being a fan of Berliner Weisse as a kind of specific beer. And if you want to serve those people, you could make a beer, you could start a brewery in Berlin brewing just this kind of beer and make a lot of money. There's actually something like this here, right? So you don't have to go into the large community to find money and to find a viable business. It can be highly specific, and people who like that particular beer, they know of this brewery. You can be very sure about that, right? They know who the brewmaster is, because those people are working in public. They're giving interviews. They're trying to build up a following. They're building up a scene in the city. It's all about specificity when it comes to micro.
Wow, that's amazing. Building a specificity. Yeah, I mean, that is amazing, extraordinary. I must say. Okay, we are coming to end. I was reading your blog about like audience first doesn't mean like you should build an audience first, right? And it's a big one. Like, I mean, I'm for all the listeners. We'll on the show notes we'll add the blog. But you had an interesting observation where you talk about rock concert and the audience, what it means, right? Like a singer like doing live shows. It's not an audience; it's something else, right? Because it's I mean, it would be great to understand what was your.
I can go into that. Well, the thing is, the term audience to me, it has always been, like I said earlier, it's a point of contention, because you ask any founder, they have a different definition what it means. Okay. So I'm trying to figure out what it doesn't mean, to just make it easier to understand, for me at least, what it doesn't mean. And when I think of audience, I really visualize it as a rock concert. Like, somebody's standing on stage, they're playing their music, they're really good at what they're doing, and I am part of the audience. I'm listening, and I paid money to get into the concert. I may be buying a t-shirt, and that's it. My role as an audience member is a consumption role. It's a role of taking in something, enjoying it, and then that's it. I have no connection to that person on stage, other than the mental connection that I have being a fan of the music that they make or something. But I don't talk to them. They don't talk to me, they talk at me. That is, to me, the standard definition of an audience, right? It's people who listen. I mean, that's the word audio is in there, and it's like it's a listening group of listeners. And I don't like that, because in the world of business, dialogue is essential. And in the world of ongoing business, and if the more I look into software as a service businesses and courses and communities, it's an ongoing transaction, right? It's not just you buy something once and then you never buy it again. You pay a monthly fee to be part of the community. You pay for that newsletter every month. You pay for that SaaS tool every month. It's a never-ending transaction. And when it comes to transactions, it used to be you go into the store, they try to sell you as much as they can, you pack it up, you pay for it, you're out, and you never come back. That's the perfect transaction in the past. But now we're looking at you come into the store and then you live there for the next 5 years. It's totally different. Now you build a relationship with people. You build a relationship with your customers from before they pay you money until while you pay money, and even beyond that. When they start paying you money, you still have a relationship with your customer. And building relationship is not something that can happen by talking at people. You have to be talking with people. You have to be talking to people, and people have to be able to talk to you, which is why I feel the audience first approach is not just about building an audience first. It's not about like building a following and then selling them something. It's actually putting the audience first. It's having everything you do be something that is like a response to a need that is expressed by your audience. Everything you try to do, you need to validate with those people. Everything you sell needs to solve a problem for your audience. And if the audience changes, your business needs to change, right? We had that a couple times with Feedback Panda, some regulation in China. Like we were serving online teachers that were teaching English to Chinese children. And then China had some regulations, which meant, like, I don't know, the kids couldn't be taught online later than 9 p.m. because a lot of parents in China really, really stuffed learning into their kids. And they were up until like 11 p.m. just learning English online. They were sleeping during the lesson because they couldn't handle it anymore. China understood, put some law in there. But that shifted the schedule because now all of a sudden people living in the United States that had been teaching that late, which means like until 11 in the morning in the US, could only teach until like 7 or 8 in the morning. And all of a sudden, that meant they had to get up earlier. So we needed to make sure that our tool was usable by people who just woke up. Like all of these things needed to go into the business. We needed to shift our messaging. We needed to help them schedule stuff better, just figure out things differently because something happened to our audience. So your business needs to be responsive. And it's like, it's a relationship that you actually have with every single customer. It's a back and forth, right? They have needs. You try to satisfy their needs. Needs change. Your way of satisfying those needs changes as well. It's a dialogue, an ongoing dialogue. So putting the audience first instead of creating the audience first, that I think is the essence of that story. And understanding an audience, not as the rock star audience where you yell at them and they love you for it, right? That's not the same. It's more like, I don't even know how to say it better, but it's a conversation. It's a conversation that you have on an even level. You want to be part of your audience. You want to build something for your peers, not for somebody that stands in front of a stage admiring you. I think those days are over. I built software tools for other authors. I feel I'm an author myself. I built this for myself at this point, and now I'm also trying to build it for other people. And I write books for founders, being a founder myself. I wrote the book for myself back then, right? Like I just said, obviously I can't go back in time and give myself the book. I wish I could, but I'm giving the book to somebody else who hopefully will have as much fortune as I had over the last couple of years. So being part of your audience, being part of the group of people you want to serve is essential to build a meaningful relationship that is sustainable and can sustain a business in the end.
Yeah, that's so great, right? Building relationship with customers is like, it doesn't happen by talking at people. You
Yes,
have to like talk with, like, to them,
yeah,
kind of thing. Like you have to
absolutely.
bring them in and talk to them. That's how you can build relationships. And again, like you build for yourself. I was reading about, I'm not recalling the author name, but what he said was, uh, Morgan Housel, the like
Mm-hmm.
he's very famous for like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things. So he said the same thing. Like he started writing for himself, right?
Yes.
It was not for anyone. Like he started writing for himself, and then you will definitely find people who who are interested in what you're writing because they resonate with you, and
Yes.
it's very similar to what they want to learn. And then you find your niche, find your like people, find your tribe.
Yeah, and you also have your own authentic voice, right? And you're not trying to copy anybody's style if you
Exactly.
write with your own style. Like you can't. Like you're writing for yourself. Well, you know how you want to have something in a certain way. And I think that's definitely a very good recommendation when it comes to content, like any kind of content. And I don't mean content in this marketing sense. I just mean teachings. Like, sounds a bit weird, but things that other people might find relevant to their learning journey, right?
Yeah.
I write a lot of stuff that to most people makes no sense, right? Because I'm talking about software acquisition and like due diligence and stuff. Like many people don't go into this, but those are also not my audience. My audience are the people who might eventually get into a position where they sell their business, and then they need to know what to do, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
I talk to them as I would talk to myself, because I need to understand what I go through, and I need to understand what the steps are. So I might just as well talk to myself or talk to them as I were talking to myself. It's a lot of meta layers in this, right? Audience first, building an audience first product, and like talking to other people by talking to yourself. It's a lot of reflection, I think,
Yeah.
in the physical sense almost. It's like mirroring, in a way,
Yeah.
and that's also what being part of your audience is all about. It's like being among those people, being one of them is being an audience member, right? And if you know what you feel as somebody in that group, then you can expect to understand what others feel, and you can build your understanding of problems and solutions from there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's so helpful. Where is the book coming out, Arvid?
Oh, if only I knew. Well, I'm still writing. The
Okay.
interesting part is, of course, I also like I have to finish it now and put it out there. Gotta do it. But there's still a lot to do on the book. I I can't tell you. What I can suggest is that you go to audience1st.link and you sign up as an alpha reader, because then I'll definitely tell you. I'm going to send the first draft once it's done. It's not going to take me too long. This is not going to take me more than the couple of weeks or months. But I want to do it justice. This is a project that is dear to me. That's important because so many people struggle with this. But
Yeah.
I definitely think. The first draft version will probably hit this year, before the end of the year, and early next year is when it's going to come out. Because honestly, like releasing and publishing a book, self-publishing a book, it's not that complicated once you have the book.
Mm,
Like all the other
mm,
things, the logistics are pretty easy. It's easy to write a book.
okay.
I mean, it's hard to write, but it's easy to publish. And that won't take much. But I want to have a good book before I start publishing it, so it'll take a bit of more time.
Nice, nice. So, where can I mean? Thanks a lot. I mean, for personally, I loved like our conversation, like
Yeah, me too.
great insights for me personally. And thanks again, thanks a lot. So, where can we, like our audience, our listeners, find you?
So
Our audience, find you on.
audience/community/
Yeah.
total addressable market. No, we you can find me on Twitter. It's the best place to find me, because that's where I'm most active. I'm there at Arvid Kahl, ARVIDKAHL. And you can find my blog at thebootstrapfounder.com. I write there every single week, and the newsletter and the podcast are linked there as well. And finally, I guess Zero to Sold, my book is at zerotosoldbook.com. Can figure out all about the book. That's sold on Amazon and Gumroad. So if you like a hard copy, that's for Amazon. But yeah, that's the three places: my blog, my Twitter, and the zerotosoldbook.com.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, Arvid. It was great listening to you.
Yeah, it was an
And
absolute pleasure. Thanks.
yeah, and that's a wrap for our today's episode.
Cool. That is awesome. Let me stop the recording.